Welcome everybody to another draw along with me. Today we are drawing this underwater seascape. As always, there's a link to the palette in the description. There's also a link to the shark brush as well that I've created for you, and you'll have everything you need to follow along with this tutorial. Just before we get started with today's tutorial, if you're also a keen artist, then the folks over at Paperlike have got you covered. You can enjoy the sound and the feel of a paper-like texture on your screen when you're drawing. If you're interested in purchasing your own Paperlike screen protector, there'll be a link down in the description. So we need to get started on drawing the bottom half of the droplet. So we're going to come to our brush library, and under calligraphy we're going to use the monoline brush. Now I'm just going to quickly run through my settings on the screen so you can see how mine is set up, and you can match yours up with your settings as well. Not a lot of these have changed, but feel free to go back and pause when you are setting up your monoline brush and make sure your settings are all the same. And some of these down here shouldn't have changed, but just to be sure, you'll just need to pause and then check yours all match up to mine. Cool. So using the white, we're just going to draw a circle, which will be the bottom half of the droplet. And again, link up your shape, hold your pen at the end, and then put your finger on the screen and you'll get a perfect circle. So we want to go for something around about that size there. And then, as always, grab your colour and drag and drop it into the circle. So we need to make sure now that this sits perfectly in the centre, which is when we see the orange line. Using the cursor at the top, you can drag and drop this into position, and you can see the orange line. If you don't see the orange line, you need to come down here to snapping and make sure that snapping is turned on. You could also do magnetics if you wanted to. So yeah, we've got that straight down the center because we've got the orange line. So we're going to let go of that one. We're now going to create a new layer above the circle, which we need to create the point of the droplet. And for this, we're going to use the drawing assist. So we're going to go to the settings. We are going to go to our canvas, and we're going to turn on the drawing guide, and we're going to go to edit drawing guide, and we're going to pick symmetry. And you can mess around with this if you want. We need it to be vertical, and at the moment I can see that it's horizontal, and just in case yours is as well, you just simply go to options and you select the different option that you need, and we actually need the horizontal setting so it reflects on either side, and then we hit done. So what this is going to allow us to do is we want to get the perfect lines to match up either side so that our point of the droplet is symmetrical. So we're going to make sure our layer here is turned on with the assist. If it's not, simply tap on the layer and turn on drawing assist here, and you'll get the little label underneath to say assisted. And what we want to do is, I'm actually going to go back to the drawing guide quickly. I'm going to change it to pink using this color slider here, so I can just simply see the line on the screen. So on that layer, continuing to use the monoline brush, we are going to create a point almost perfectly at the top on the line, and then draw a straight line down. And we want to just make sure that it clips the edge of the circle, such as there, like so. And now we've got the outline of the shape. We just need to merge these two together by pinching the layers together and then drop the white color in. And don't worry if it slightly bulges out at either side, because we'll end up getting rid of that with some coral for the rest of the design. Just because I didn't touch on it there, if you were drawing the straight line, simply just draw a line and hold your pen at the end, and it will draw a perfectly straight line, and you'll be able to drag and drop it where you want it. So what we're going to do next is we're going to start on the top layer, which is the coral, which is down the bottom half here, and then we're going to make our way backwards through the scene and then add in the lighting effects as well. So we want to go to our layers, we want to create a new layer, and we're going to tap on it and use the clipping mask, which means anything we draw will simply only show within the shape of the droplet. And we're going to go to our palettes, which is available in the description, as I've already mentioned. And we are going to use the black color first, because obviously this stuff at the front is really shadowed out. And what you want to do is we're going to turn off the drawing guide as well, we're going to go up to the settings and turn that off so we don't see that line down the middle anymore. And we're just going to use the monoline brush under calligraphy still. And the first thing you want to do is simply just create some land at the bottom here. And if you, like myself, you can just continue to go upwards as well if you want to. And the only thing you need to do is when you get to the end, bring your brush all the way down and around and make sure it links up at the beginning, and you should be able to just drag and drop your colour in to the space. And we're going to do the same now for the other side as well, so that we are creating our little coral landscape. And again, I'm on the same layer and just building up that rocky texture. And we're going to come all the way back around to where we started and then drop our colour in, like so. Don't worry if you get any little bumps and lumps like this, because we're going to fill out the bottom here again with like seaweed, coral, etc. So little things like that will actually potentially add to the design as well. So what I want to do now is, just because if I want to move a piece of coral or seaweed around, I'm going to create a new layer, and I'm also going to tap on that and use the clipping mask as well. So now what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to go to my calligraphy section on my brush library and use the option script, which gives you a much more flowing sort of brush, which depending on how much pressure you use also changes how much thickness and how much ink is used on the screen. I like using it for this particular piece because it gives some variation for like the seaweed as well as the coral. So we're going to start on our new layer that we created, and we're just going to draw in some seaweed. So I'm going to drop my brush size to around about 20%, and let's see how that looks. Perfect. And because of this brush, you can see I started off quite lightly. I pressed a little bit harder and then I got lighter as we got towards the end. And you just want to repeat that process like so and fill out your seaweed. I like to do them in groups of 3, but you can do it however you wish. And so I'm going to add some more seaweed here. And the more waves you put in it, just makes it look like there is a lot more movement in the piece. So I'm going to maybe just add one more up here, and I'm going to make this one fairly large as well, like so. And then I'm going to add in items such as rocks and pieces of coral as well that might be on the ground here as well as up on the side. So I'm going to press really hard and create kind of like a little, I'm not sure what the name is to be honest with you, but I think it's the coral, but they like create really flat surfaces which look really cool. And I'm just using my brush to press down for different pressures, which creates different thicknesses as well. And you can go back over your line and maybe thicken it up like that. I'm just going to maybe add in one here like so. That's cool. And maybe here I'm going to add in a piece of coral as well, more the tree style effect, so like so. Everybody's design for this particular piece is going to look very different to one another. Yours will look quite different to mine depending on how you do it, but we're just adding textures and items into this landscape down here. So here I'm just going to add in a rock as well, something quite pointy and sharp, and just add in little pieces of items like that. And I'm going to come down to the bottom here and kind of do the same. I in my piece on Instagram did this little jittery effect like this, which just maybe creates the illusion that there's like a rough rocky surface down there. And we'll do the same on this side as well, just add in like a jittery shaky effect towards the bottom there. I'm going to continue to add in some pieces of coral like so. That's cool. And then just like my piece on Instagram, I'm going to add in quite a large, I'm not sure what the name of it is, but it's like a coral looking tree. And for this I'm going to create one new layer just in case we need to move it around or resize it. So I'm going to come up to my layers, create a new one. I'm also going to make it a clipping mask as well. And for this one you kind of want to draw like a tree. Let's just start off with the first line. I'm actually going to make it a bit smaller than that, like so. And then every time you get to a certain point, you need to create a split. So the tree will go in that direction, then that direction, then this direction. And you just create a lot of different splits and just completely keep growing and growing and growing. Like so. So we just continue to create all these different arms of the branches of the coral piece, and we're going to come up here as well. Now I would anticipate with this particular tutorial that there'll be a lot of pausing potentially while you plan out your own piece, so I would anticipate you would need to do that throughout this. And we also just add in lots of little sort of nubs as well, which we can fill out the rest of the body of the sort of tree like design that we've got going on here. And we just add in the extra little sticks in here. And you can create some extra branches to fill out certain spaces if you've not got the amount of filler that you want from this particular tree. So I've branched out into this space here, and you can continue to split the different branches as we go. And if you don't like the line that you particularly create, just use 2 fingers and you can undo it like so. So you'll see me quite commonly throughout this particular piece just use 2 fingers to undo what I just did if I don't like it or the weight of the brush wasn't correct. And this one will take a little bit of time to fill out, so we'll continue to just do so. Maybe thicken this up towards the bottom as well, like so. It's not looking too bad, we're nearly there. And like that, you want to create an overall quite rounded sort of, like a normal tree, but that kind of amount of space needs to be filled up from this particular item on this seabed floor. And some lines can be quite jammed together like that. There is no right or wrong way of doing this. It is your own design as well. And I think potentially I'm just going to maybe branch out into here a little bit more, just to fill the space. The only thing I don't like is this particular bit here, and you can just grab your eraser, go to calligraphy, and I typically use the monoline brush to erase because it's a perfect circle. Little tip, if you want to see the tip of your brush, simply go to your preferences and turn on brush cursor, and then if I make my brush really large, you can see there's a circle around the brush, so you can see where exactly you're about to erase from. And I'm just going to sort of, it gets a bit too weighty towards the tip of this particular point, and we'll just thin these out a little bit more like so. Cool, that's that little piece done. The only thing I want to now do is just add some extra rocky sort ofness up here, as well as add some more texture in the floor down here as well. So I'm actually just going to quickly go back to my layers, and I'm going to continue on this layer that we were using for the seaweed, the rocks, the other bits of coral, not this tree-like piece. So it's all on the same layer. And I'm going to continue to use the script brush under calligraphy as well. So for this one, let's go back to around about 10%. Let's try and get some more finer details in here. And for this one, I'm creating like a rock just in here, and you can quickly, should be able to just, if I've linked up my shape correctly, just drag and drop the colour in for the shape that you created. You kind of want it to be kind of textured though, so it's kind of pointed, not rather than rounded like that. So I just fix that one up there. And you can continue to use the same that sort of jittery effect that we did at the very bottom here, because it will add a lot more texture and get rid of a lot of the smoother lines, such as here. You know, you don't want it to be smooth because the surface will not be smooth. There'll be a lot going on. Okay, cool. I'm moving up onto this left hand side, and in a second I'll zoom out so you'll be able to see exactly what I've done, and then you'll be able to potentially pause and then copy along with where I've added all these extra bits and bobs in, and see if it matches up to yours, or make any changes before we move on to add in the other layers in the background. So let's have a look. I'm going to add a rock, a bigger rock here, like so. That just adds a little bit more there. And maybe some smaller little sort of, not grass, but like seagrass, I guess. Little flicks, just to add some extra details in here. Maybe it's small seaweed, like so. And if I zoom out, you can get an idea as to what scene I created there. So we've got a rocky edge here, a rocky edge on the side as well. We've got bits of coral coming in as well as seaweed, this other large piece of coral, and the rocks and seaweed across the bottom. So now would be the perfect time to potentially pause, check against your design and see if you want to make any changes before we progress onto the other layers. I'm going to carry on from this point, assuming that you have done so. And we're just going to create one new layer, and again, make it a clipping mask. And we're just going to add in some fish down the bottom here. So for the fish, you can start at like a point and then create kind of like a rounded diamond shape, such as that. Drag your colour in, and then at either end, depending on which one you'd rather do, I'd rather put it on this end at the moment, you kind of create a C shape, and then like so, and then just fill in that gap. And you may get slightly rounded edges like that. And again, come to your eraser. Under calligraphy, I'll use the monoline brush and make it quite small. And you can zoom in and just sort of sharpen off that edge a little bit more. This has still got quite a animated style design to it, so there's no realism requirements here. The only thing I've just added there was a fin. So that's one fish. And if you wanted to, if you're really happy with that particular one, you can just simply go to your layers for the fish layer. And if you did it correctly and put it on its own individual layer, you can duplicate it by swiping it to the left and tapping on duplicate. And grab your cursor, maybe flip it horizontally so it doesn't look like you copied and pasted it. Maybe make it slightly smaller, and then just pop it wherever you want it. And then you can maybe do that a few times. So I'm going to duplicate that layer again. I'm going to go to my cursor, I'm going to make this one even smaller, and I'm going to pop him just in here. If you want to create many different variations of fish, you could do so. You don't have to do that. That's just a little time saver if you're happy with that particular fish design. So now what we're going to do, we're going to move on to the layers in the background of the different sort of landscape, underwater landscape that we were building. So we're going to go to our layers. We're going to tap on the droplet because we need to create a layer that's underneath all of this dark coral layer. And if you wanted to, you could merge all those together right now. We won't be going back to them to make any changes, but I'm going to leave them there just for the moment. And the first thing we want to do is actually add in the layer of the coral. So for this one, I'm going to use, let's try this color here. There are a different number of colors here. You can try out each one, but I'll make sure to make you aware of which one I'm selecting. And I'm going to use this one here. I'm going to use this one on the far right, and I'm going to use my calligraphy brush, and I'm going to use the monoline, and making sure we're on this new layer. And if you tapped on the droplet and hit the plus, it will add a layer here perfectly. I'll delete that so you can see. If I hit the plus, it will clip the layer straight away in the right position. And for this, we're kind of going to create like a similar style sort of shape that we did here, where it's quite like a U shape, but we're gonna just do a really sort of rough idea of our landscape, like so. And then the only thing you want to do is just grab your brush, make it really large if you want to, just to help yourself, and start at your end point of where your line was and just keep drawing all the way around and link up. So again, we can drag and drop our color into the space like so. Now that's just the basic idea of where we're gonna sort of lay this all out. And you kind of want to give a nice gap here as well, so when we apply the lighting later on, it will look really nice and we'll be able to see some nice gradient in here. So what we now want to do is go to our calligraphy brush and go down to the script again. And we're just going to flush this out in the same way we did here, except this is more just rocks. And the rocks are sloped in on either side, and maybe there's a rock in the middle. So a really good way of doing that is, again, just kind of using like a jittery effect like so, because all of these different sort of jitters are just the rock surface over the, I guess, over the years, and how it's sort of created different layers and eroded away. And you'll end up with something like that, where it then sort of creates that rocky shape to it, and it will look really nice when we add in the highlights as well. And again, I'm going to continue across here from right to left. I'm just going to create that jittery effect that we did before, so it's not so smooth, like so. That's giving it a nice little bit of texture. We'll come back to this middle. And we're going to do exactly the same over on the right hand side as well. We're going to create that rocky sort of look to it, except this one we're going to maybe go out a little bit like that, and then we're going to come back in and then go back out again. And we could even do it one more time, you know, create that real rocky effect to it like that. And if you linked up here, and then make sure you've linked up here at the top, so I'm just drawing a little line, you should be able to just drag and drop your color in like so. And that's got a quite nice shape to it on this side, so I'm not going to make any adjustments there. The only thing I'm going to change is right here in the middle. I just want to add a rocky style effect. So what I'm doing, again, using like a side to side motion, I'm going up like so, and then coming back down, and then like so. And then when you grab the brush and drop it in, we get like a really nice rocky texture to that shape. Now that I'm pretty happy with. I'm not going to make any further adjustments to that one. That one's going to look really nice when we add in the highlights and the shadows into this rocky area here. So we're going to just move on to the section in behind. So again, I'll zoom out so you can get an idea as to what I've created, and then you can pause and maybe make some adjustments if you need to. But we're going to carry on. We're going to go to our layers. I'm going to tap on the droplet again because we want to create another layer that's right at the very back of this project. You hit the plus, and then we're going to come to our colors, and I'm just going to pick a slightly lighter tone, so maybe this one here. And then I'm going to go to my brush library. I'm going to go to calligraphy again, and I'm going to scroll up to the monoline. And in exactly the same fashion, we're just going to create a U shape here. Let's use this one so I definitely know it's a different color. The fourth one in from the right. And using the monoline brush, I'm going to drop it down to around about 20. And we're going to create a U shape first, and then we're going to flush it out with more detailed texture. So for this one, I'm going to come in quite high, like so. And then I'm going to swing all the way around up to the top, hold my brush all the way down, and continue to draw my line right back to where I started, and drop the colour in. So I kind of created somewhat of the right sort of texture over here. This side I just kept smooth because we're just going to add it in now. So we're going to go to our brush library. Again, scroll back down to script. I only like using the script brush because, again, the harder you press throughout the design, you'll get thicker lines and thinner lines, and it can just add to the randomness of the texture that you're trying to create. So we're at 20%, and just starting up here, I'm just going to do a similar sort of rocky texture, maybe come in again on this side once, like so. Maybe just make this a bit more of a vertical drop, and then again you should be able to just drag your colour in if your lines will link up. And then on this side, I'm going to just flush this one out a bit more, like so, just creating that little, all these little jittery effects. Just grab the colour, drop it in there, and like so. just going to drag our colour in, like that. And then the only thing I want to do is then, again, the rocky texture across the bottom, just using the script brush, and we can maybe add in like a rock here, like so. I may just add in a little bit more to that, so it's not too similar to the shape underneath it, such as like that. And again, that's kind of what we've ended up with. We've got the nice sort of rough lines to it. Now from here you can start to add in some extra little bits and bobs in terms of like seaweed and extra rocks, which I'm going to do. I'm going to stay on the exact same layer we're on, and again, continuing like with the script brush, we're going to add in some seaweed. Now because this is quite far back, we don't want it to be any bigger than this seaweed we've got here at the front. So maximum size you really want to go is something around about this size. So let's just add in little bits of seaweed like so. Like that. And then maybe we could add in some more, let's say over here. And you don't always have to do 3. You can maybe just do 2, just to change it up a little bit. You could even add a 4th one in there if you really wanted to, like so. And apart from that, I'm happy with that. And again, if I'll zoom out so you can get an idea as to the whole scene that we're creating. So what we will now want to do is we kind of want to work on just this background gradient that will sort of add a bit more to this, and you'll be able to see sort of the whole design start to come together. So we're going to go down to our layers and we're going to create a brand new one. We're going to, by tapping on the droplet, and create another one, because again we're working backwards and now we're doing the actual background. So we're going to go to our brush library, we are going to go to the airbrushing, and we're going to use the soft brush right at the top here, and the brush size is going to be around about the 50% mark. And for this we want to start with our base colour, which is essentially this colour here, and we're going to, so that's the 3rd one in from the left, just going to fill in the whole thing here. And if you made sure you used your clipping mask correctly, you won't be able to draw outside of the lines, and just fill out the whole thing. And then what we want to do is we want to grab the much lighter sort of turquoisey colour, and we want to just very lightly start drawing in around the point at the top, and it will start to create a bit of a gradient effect down towards the blue. And then we want to grab the white colour, and you can grab white quite easily. If you're anywhere in your picker disc here, you can quickly just tap at the top and it will pick the white. And we're going to drop the brush size down to 40%, and we're just going to very lightly in a circular motion build up the colour here. We don't want to go all the way to white, but we just want to make sure that there's a nice little bit of colour coming from the top there. And then we want to potentially just grab a slightly darker colour, maybe this one here, which is the 5th one in from the right hand side, and we want to just add an ever so slight bit of something down here, which I've just added a little bit of different colour just down the bottom. And then to make sure it's a perfect sort of gradient, we're going to go to our adjustments, we're going to go to Gaussian blur, and we're going to select the layer option, and you should be able to just drag your brush across and it will blur it all together. So around about 20%. You might not see a great change if you've done it correctly, but it just makes sure that all your colours nicely blend one into the other, And then what we want to do next is we will add in some extra little bits of highlight to the rocks before we add in the shark and then the other items of lighting as well. Now for this one, what we're going to do is we're going to go to our brushes, our layers, sorry, and we are going to add a new layer just above this blue section here by hitting the plus button. So tap on the dark blue, which is this one just here, add a new layer, and then we're going to go to our colors, and we can either do 2 things. We can either use white as the highlight color, or we can use the turquoise. I typically use white, but for this one we're going to change it and we're going to use the turquoisey green teal color. And I'm going to go into my calligraphy and I'm going to use the script brush, and we're going to make it quite small. I'm going to make it around about the 10% mark. We might change that in a second. Now, with this particular point now, you need to bear in mind that the lighting is all coming from the top. That's where the light source is coming from, all from the top. So anything with a direct line of sight to the top would have a little highlight on it. So, good example here is this rock here. The underside of this will not have any highlight on it, but this top edge will. So we'll simply just use our brush, and this can be nice and random. We're just adding a little bit of something just to the top of this, so just to show that the light would have hit this. And I'm leaving like a gap around the edge, as well as I'm not going all the way to the edge. I want this to be quite clean, quite simple and minimal. And then again, I'm just sort of coming down here like this, making sure that I'll go back over my line if I made it too straight, and just add in little sort of wiggles to add in texture, like so. And we're going to tone this down in a second. We've just used that colour for the moment so we can nicely see what it is we're trying to do. This rock here is going to look really nice because we will just add a nice little bit here on the top, and then all of these little layers here where they potentially wrap around the side of the rock may have some light hit them as well, and you can just start to sort of create that layered rock look to it, like so. And you can leave gaps like that, which would mean that, you know, it's not a flat surface, not every part of it will hit the lighting at the top. And we can maybe add in some lines here as well, even though they're slightly hidden. I'm going to leave a little gap, and they can be quite random, thinner, smaller, thicker, like so. And then if we go to this side, because of the way I've particularly done this, we've got quite a jaggedy line like that. It will look quite similar to that rock at the bottom. So there'll be like a nice bit of light at the top here that will sit there, and then there'll be a gap because there'll be a shadow, and likewise there'll be a shadow here. And then you can just add in little sort of layers of light towards the top here, like so. And then I'm just going to add in maybe one like this, where it just shows that it's like a slightly rounded shape a bit more. Maybe I'll do the same here as well. And likewise there, and then just add in little random lines just towards the bottom here. Now you could go quite intense with the highlights here. You could spend a lot of time really flushing out a shape and intense details for the rock, but we're going to leave it like that. So again, you can zoom out, you can see there's a lot of light hitting here, there's a lot of light hitting here, and then you can just see the layer sort of build up of the rock down here as well. And for this, we're just going to go to our layer, we're going to tap on the N, which stands for normal, and we're just going to drag the opacity down, and we're going to drag it down to around about 30%, maybe 40. We'll meet in the middle and we'll go 35%. And then we've got some nice highlights on there as well. And once we start to add in all the highlights in a second, they'll actually pop a lot more. So they'll become a little bit brighter, which is why I try to dial it down a little bit. And we'll do the exact same for the layer in the background. Now you could actually just stay on this same layer, to be honest, and we will do that. So we will stay on the same layer we've got, and you'll notice now when you paint it in, obviously it will be at 30%. So we're just going to do exactly the same effects, like so. And I'm creating those lines, which again just creates that sort of rounded look to the sort of the rock face, like that. That's awesome. A little bit there. You don't have to do those lines round every time, because otherwise it sort of becomes too much. Just a couple can really sort of give you the illusion that that's quite a rounded shape. Like so, and then we're just going to keep going along. We've got the surface down here, just add two little bops there, and then this again, the underside of this particular dip, you don't want to add anything to it because that would technically be a shaded section. So I'm going to come around my canvas a little bit here, reach over, and then just add in some extra highlights like so, and don't do the underside of it. And again, I'm just going to do the same here as well, but then I will add some horizontal sort of lines there. That one's actually in the wrong position because it needs to sit on the top here of this little bump, like so, and likewise here too. You know, will really give the illusion that that's quite a flat surface, like so. So I'm happy now with the highlights of the piece. We might now go in and add in some shadows, so we can do that by going to our layers, and then above our highlight layer we're just going to add a new one, so it'll automatically clip. We're going to select black from our color picker, so I'm going to double tap towards the bottom here, and straight off the bat we're going to turn the layer down to, let's say, 50%. We can adjust it afterwards, like so. So everything we now draw in will be 50%, and we're going to go in, start on the dark layer again, and add in the the shadows. And so the shadow would live underneath here, like so. And we're not going to add in too many of these. It's just going to be in the real obvious places that there would have been some sort of shadowing, like underside of a lot of these rocks, for example. And again, we'd sort of come around a little bit just to give the illusion that it's quite a rounded shape, like so. And occasionally some sort of shadow in here as well. You want to be careful because otherwise it can really break up your illusion of the light from that rock, so you don't want to do too much, like so. And then this side, the only time really would be maybe like here, where maybe there's a little lip of the rock where it layers over itself, like so, and like that as well. So I'm not actually going to add in any more, quite simple shadows for that sort of area. And I'm actually not going to add any in the far distance as well, because things are getting further away. The details are also going to start getting a little bit blurrier, so we wouldn't maybe be able to see those shadows. So I think they're a little bit too dark right now, so I'm just going to go back to my layer and tap on the N, and I'm going to drag it down, and we're going to go down to around about 30%. We were at 50, like so. Perfect. So if at the beginning of the tutorial I mentioned about using the shark brush that I've added in the description, we can now go to our layers, and we want to create a new layer right at the top. So we're going to hit the plus icon at the top of our layers, and we're going to go to the brushes, and we're going to grab the Create brush, which is this shark one here, and then go to our canvas, and we want it to be the same color as this blue here. So you can either go to your picker and select it was this color here on the far right, or a little tip, you can just hold your finger down on the screen and select the color that you want, and you can do that anywhere, like so, and you'll see the color in the top right change. I'm going to make our brush slightly bigger because we can just make it smaller afterwards. I'm going to tap it on the screen, and we'll get our shark. So I was up to around about the 35% mark there. And then with our cursor, we just want to make it slightly smaller and drag it into position like so. And again, we want to kind of keep this guy right in the middle of the design. So if you keep dragging your shark across, you'll eventually hit the orange line, and you'll be able to leave it there, which means it's perfectly in the center of the design. Now, in my one I did on Instagram, I had him slightly lower, but I'm actually going to leave him around about there, like that. That's nice. And then because he's obviously in the same environment, we also need to add some highlights and shadows to the shark as well. So we're going to hit a new layer above the shark, and we're going to tap on that and hit clipping mask. If you added your layer correctly at the top, this shark layer that we created will not be clipped to the rest of the design and doesn't need to be. So when we create this layer here, which I've got called layer 14, it will clip to the shark layer. So just make sure your shark isn't clipped to the rest of the design like all of this is underneath, and you can see that by that little icon on the left there. So just tap on it and tap on clipping mask, and it will unclip itself from the design. But yeah, this new layer we need to clip to the shark, so we tap on it and go clip. So now everything that we paint now will only go onto the shark and not the design that we created in the background. and we want to add in some highlights only, because the lighting would bounce off of the ground underneath and highlight the actual underside of the shark as well. So we're going to go and select this color here, the second one in the palette. We're going to go to our brush library and we're going to select the airbrush. I'm going to use the soft brush, and I'm going to drop my brush size to around about the 15% mark, and we're just going to highlight the underside. And that's actually still too big, that brush, so we're going to go all the way down to around about 5%, and that's perfect. And very lightly, you just want to create some highlights underneath sort of the belly of the shark, like so, maybe on the outer edge of this fin, but we're pressing very lightly here. If you don't own an Apple Pencil and you don't have a pen that has pressure sensitivity, simply just drop your opacity down here and you'll be able to just keep building and building and building up the color. And that's an easy way to do that if you don't own a pressure sensitive brush. And we're just adding in some more, just like so. But we also want to add in a little bit on the top because the light is actually still coming down as well, but we want it to be a different color from that. So I'm just going to go to the color picker and double tap on the top left hand corner to select white, and then very lightly, that's arguably too heavy, very lightly just add in some white on the top of the shark as well, which gives us that nice glow from underneath, but also a little bit of a highlight from the top as well. And now we can get started on adding in our light rays that come all the way down from the very top. So just as a sort of heads up of where we are with the design, we're going to add in the light rays, some bubbles as well, and then add in the highlights as well down the bottom here, which will tie everything together really nicely. I'm actually going to add in the highlights down here first, and then we'll add the light rays instead. So we're going to go to our layers, and we are going to go to our first navy layer here, and we're going to add a new layer here above our shadow. So this one here is our highlights. If I turn them on and off, you can see that. And then this is our shadows as well. So we want to create it just above those. And as we've done in previous tutorials, I only want to paint within the shape of this rocky texture down here, but because it's clipped to other shapes, we can't do that. And I don't want to paint particularly on that layer. I like my highlights and shadows to be separate, just in case I change my mind, want to change the colors, or just completely restart. So we're going to tap on, we've created a new layer here. We're going to tap on our rocky texture and we're going to use the option select. We're going to go back to the new layer we created here. So above the highlights, above the shadows, and this one here. And we're going to tap on it and select mask. Now what it will do is it's added a mask in, which means I can only paint within the same sort of shape as that area down there. So we're just going to tap on the select at the top to complete that, and then we're going to go and tap on, make sure you're tapped on layer 15. I had a comment about this. If you're, the darker layer out the two is the one that you're actually drawing on. If you're drawing on the layer mask, you won't be able to actually draw anything on the design. You need to be here. And then what you want to do is grab your little color here, which is the second color, which will be our highlight, and we're going to use a soft brush for that. We're going to make it a little bit larger, and we're going to go to around about the 30% mark. And we're just going to very lightly towards the top edge only add in our highlights to the design like that. And that will really give the impression that there's light hitting the top of the rocks that's coming from above. And then we're going to do the exact same for the background as well. And we've really got a nice sort of build up of color here as well, which is going to really tie into the background sort of sea color as well. So we're going to go to our layers again, and this layer here is the one in the background. So we're going to tap on that on our plus icon as well, which will add a new layer above that. And same process, we're going to tap on this layer here. We're going to tap on it and then select the option select, which is now selected the same shape of that layer. And then on the layer above, we're going to tap on that and select mask, which again means that we can only paint within the same shape. That's what a mask is. A mask means that you are getting rid of everything top and bottom of that, and you should only be able to paint within the same shape. And we're going to make sure we're on the actual layer and not on the mask. And same process, using the same airbrush we used, very lightly in a circular motion, just build up the colours like so, and we'll end up with a nice little glow towards the top edge of that. Now, as you can see, mine's actually quite light now. All these colours are arguably too light. So we're just going to change the background colour of this rock face that's way in the distance. You could leave it, arguably it still looks correct, it's further away, so maybe the colours will blend together, but I just want to match up to the design that I created on Instagram. So we're going to tap on the layer here, and we're going to go to our colour pickers, and I think it's this one here, this one here is the one we should have picked, the second one from the left. I'm going to drag and drop our colour into there, and that's a lot closer to the design I created on Instagram. So again, we are using the second colour here on the left, and I just dragged and dropped it into the layer that was there. So now we are really close to the end of this tutorial. We're going to add in the light beams at the top, add in the bubbles, and that's the final few touches. So we are going to go to our layers. We are going to add this layer right at the very top, and we're going to do it at the very top of the whole piece to start with, and then we may drag and drop the light beams into different spots within the different layers of the piece. Just gives that variation that some lights are going right in the background, some are right up in the front in the center, and it just gives more depth front to back. So for this one, I actually created a rectangle by using the calligraphy brush, the monoline under calligraphy, and then selected white. And then the new layer that we created right at the very top, I simply zoom out a little bit and I create quite a skinny rectangle like so. Doesn't need to be perfect at all, and then held my pen down at the end and it will create a shape, and you can just drag and drop your colour in like that. And then all we essentially doing are going to erase one side of it. So one side will be a nice beam and the other side will be like a gradient as well. So we're going to go to our eraser. We're going to use the airbrush. So we need to go to airbrushing and use the soft brush. And I'm going to drop the brush to 20%. And all I'm going to do is just go up and down until we get rid of this edge here, but we also keep that edge on the left hand side. And you kind of want to go slow and build it up, and like so you should end up with a shape like that, where we've got a straight edge on here. This edge is now completely gone, and you've kind of got the transition from white through to emptiness. And then what we can do is we can just sort of in a circular motion just fade out the edges as well, the top and the bottom, like so, getting rid of that line at the top. And that's the shape that we're going to use a couple of times for 4 different light beams. So what I did was I actually grabbed my cursor icon, and rotate the layer we just created, maybe make it slightly shorter, and all the light needs to come from this particular point towards the top, and at angles down either side. And so we're going to leave this one like here, for example, and don't worry about it going outside of the design because I'm about to drag and drop it into the right spaces. So that's perfect for that one. And what we'll do is we'll drag it into the right position now. So we'll hold down on the layer, and we want it to be behind the black corals that we created, but in front of everything else. And for that, I think we just need to leave it here, which is behind, again, this black coral layer here, which is this one here, and in front of the other background layers of Seascape. What we want to do now is tap on the layer and select the option of overlay. And then what we want to do is go to our adjustments, and we want to go to Gaussian blur, and we want to blur that layer out ever so slightly. We're looking at around about the 6% mark, where it keeps quite a sort of straight line here, but when we get the nice glow edge off to the side. And tap on the adjustments to complete that. So this actual beam of light's now done completely. We can go ahead and duplicate it a few times and pop it in the relevant spaces. So we're going to grab this layer and swipe it to the left, And all the layer effects that we did on it now are already done, so we can just drag and drop it into the spot that we want. And I'm going to grab my cursor, I'm going to drag this one here and rotate it slightly like so. And maybe for this one I will maybe make it slightly skinnier just to add some variation. And like so, we've added our second beam of light into the design. And what we might do now is actually tap on the O, which is now set to overlay, and maybe just drop that down ever so slightly. So some beams are slightly lighter than the other ones. So for this one, we've actually dropped it to 60%, which just gives a variation from this one that we created. So there's different strengths. Potentially this one's further back in the design. And so these two beams, we've got the straight edge on the left-hand side. When we duplicate these, I'm actually going to flip them when we put them on this side. So I'm going to grab the layer we just created. I'm going to slide it to the left and hit duplicate. I'm going to go to my cursor icon. And I'm just going to use the option flip horizontal, which then means the straight edge is on the right-hand side. And for that, I'm going to maybe change the angle again so it changes it up, keeps it sort of, gives it that random effect to it. And I'm actually going to raise this slightly up as well. So it's like so. And same again, one last time, we're going to swipe this layer that we just used to the left and hit use duplicate. And then I'm going to drag it into position, changing the angle to make sure it all comes from that middle point at the top, and leave that way out there on the right hand side, so we get nice different variations on where the lighting goes and lands. The only one I want to change is this one, as it's slightly too bright. I think we could tap on the layer and maybe drop it down ever so slightly like so. Perfect. And so the only thing we want to do now is just add in the bubbles, which are making their way up to the top. And this is a really simple thing to do. We can go to our layers and scroll all the way up to the very top, and then tap on the highest layer you've got and use the plus. We're going to go to our brush library and use the monoline brush. And all we're going to do, by zooming in with 2 fingers, we're going to draw a circle with the monoline, make it a perfect circle. So hold your pen at the end and pop your finger on the screen. Drag and drop your white in. And the only thing we want to do is simply just erase the middle of it until we end up with an outside edge. So I'll show you what I mean. We'll go to the eraser and use the soft brush, which is under airbrushing. Drop that down to, let's say, 5%. That might be too big. No, that's fine. And in the center, you simply just continue in a circular motion to erase the middle until you get this effect where you've got like a couple of edges that might be quite thin, some other edges that are slightly thicker, and that's your bubble. And with this, you can start to make it slightly smaller and drag and drop a few of them into position. You could here mess around with the different layer options as well. You could also make this potentially overlay, which will let a lot more of the blue through, and that's what we'll do. But you can mess around with all the layer effects. So that one's quite a large one. We might make that slightly smaller, and using the uniform version of the cursor, it will make sure it stays a perfect circle like so. And all you're going to do, similar to the light beams, is just swipe it to the left, which will duplicate the layer, and then just using the cursor icon, drag it into position, maybe make some variations, so some slightly smaller, and again, same again, swipe that to the left, drag and drop into position where we want these bubbles to go. So I'm going to have a few on this side, a few on the right hand side, and then we are done. And now when I use 2 fingers to zoom out, we've got the full design where we've got the shark in and amongst this seascape. We've got the nice lines of the light coming from the top, as well as the bubbles as well. So that completes today's tutorial. I hope you enjoyed it. It was a little bit of a different style in terms of the underwater effects that we've used here. So hopefully there's a few bits and bobs there you've learned from this particular tutorial. As always, please tag me in your creations on Instagram. If you add them to your story and tag me in them, I will happily repost them to my story for everybody to see. Joel.create on Instagram. I'm Joel Create on TikTok, where you can also mention me in your TikToks as well. If you enjoyed this tutorial, please drop a like below and also drop a comment just letting me know how you got on. Did you enjoy it? It really helps whether or not we do some more of this style in the future. And as always, a lot of my designs are available on Etsy should you want to go and purchase any. Otherwise, feel free to subscribe down below, and I'll see you in the next tutorial.